All right, good afternoon. My heart is heavy today as we remember and mourn the tragic shooting at Annunciation Catholic School. As a mother and a legislator, I can't begin to imagine the pain these families are enduring. My prayers are with them, their loved ones, and the entire Annunciation community. I want to thank the brave testifiers that came on Monday. They came forward to share their stories. It takes tremendous courage to relive the horror of hearing the gunshots, the panic of running toward your children, and the terror of not knowing if they were safe. Some spoke of lifelong physical injuries and scars, others of trauma that will never truly heal. Their voices matter, and their experience must guide our response. This heartbreaking act of violence reminds us that protecting our children must be top priority. Every student deserves to feel safe in their classroom, and every parent deserves peace of mind when they drop their child off at school. We must act with urgency, strengthening school safety, improving access to mental health support, and ensuring that violent criminals face real consequences through mandatory minimum sentencing. Minnesotans deserve safe schools and safe communities, and I'm committed to seeing that happen. Minnesotans and families want action. We want safe schools, strong communities, and leaders who will take crime seriously. I'm committed to working with my colleagues to pursue real solutions that protect our children and uphold justice. Annunciation, we grieve with you, and now is the time for real solutions, not just slogans. Thank you.
You know, I don't know if I should actually speak, because most of what I had to say, I think I've said it already. I truly believe that we need to do things now. The issue is, and we all want to protect our kids. We all want safe schools. But the issue is how do we get there? How do we do it? We can pass all these gun laws, which I believe will be tied up in court and won't take effect, if they ever take effect, for years. And we're going to put all kinds of ink on paper. Ink on paper does not protect our kids. But after touring the Lakeville School District and seeing what they did to harden their school in the way they did it, I think is a very important tool that we need to apply to protect all of our kids. And of course, as Senator Heitzman said, we need to address the mental health issues, and we need to build out the mental health system that still is not there. Thank you.
Senator, while you're up there, why did Republicans not bring more proposals to this working group about mental health and other issues?
Well, we had a short, I learned on Wednesday, late Wednesday, that we had to have our proposals in by 10 a.m. Friday in bill format. You know, I didn't want to bring I do have a proposal, but it's not written out. It's being drafted. I didn't have time to make it happen. So given, yeah, they said our leadership knew, but we didn't know exactly who else was on the committee. But we didn't have time to actually do a proper, you've seen us try to respond with a couple of items, but they were very rapidly put together. We just didn't have the time frame that we should have had.
Just a quick follow-up. It sounds like Senator Letts said he welcomed, like Senator Matthews did, kind of one on the fly, a proposal that there seemed to be some consensus on. Could there have been more proposals from your side to try to get consensus?
We did get an email about the hearing today. Sorry. We did get an email today saying that we were only going to discuss what we discussed on Monday from the committee for the hearing today. I have a half a dozen bills ready to go for special session or being drafted to go. So I think there's plenty of ideas. We need to focus on the solution, which is protecting our kids. Obviously, we heard what the Democrats proposed, and hopefully we will get to a special session, and we can have that discussion. If they want to have it, then let's really look at the root of the problem and what can we do to protect our kids. I think we have a lot of great ideas. We just need to get them heard. You know, I've had bills for years on school safety that didn't get across the finish line. And we can do better. We should do better. Hopefully, we have the momentum to carry those bills forward now to get something done.
One more thing to add to that previous question is to keep in mind that Republicans have been offering solutions in the various committees, education committees, health committees, judiciary committee, and other committees on an array of topics for the last several years. But Democrats have repeatedly been shooting and voting our ideas down, whether they've been in committee, in amendment form, whether they're not giving hearings at all in the committees, or whether Republicans are offering solutions, whether it be safe school funding, whether it be increasing minimum sentences, whether it be mental health solutions. On the floor, they've been voted down repeatedly. So Republicans have been offering these solutions, but unfortunately the Democrat majority has not been willing to even consider these and continues to vote them down.
This is for all 5 senators. The Annunciation parents were unambiguous in their calls. They want an assault weapons ban. Did their testimony change your mind at all on that issue?
Yeah, like I said, Monday was really powerful and was really sad to hear all of those. And a lot of these bills about guns are going to be very tough discussions. And they've had bipartisan opposition in the past. Our legislature is so closely divided that anything that we do will have to be bipartisan supported. So whether that bill will get from bipartisan opposition to bipartisan support, you know, I speak for myself. I think there's still some problems with that method. But the way I went about it is we have to answer the now what question. How do we make sure that someone who has gone around every law gets stopped and prevented from inflicting harm on our kids? Which is why when we got the opportunity to bring more proposals, I said, in everything I'm thinking through, this is what I keep coming back to, is I think probably the lowest hanging fruit of what we could do that would have a positive impact immediately. And that's what we need to do, since this special session will have to be a bipartisan session in both chambers.
Senator Heinzman, could you step forward? You mentioned being the newest member of the Senate, probably the closest to the electorate since you were just elected. And as a mom, did seeing and hearing those moms have any impact?
It was extremely impactful. I had tears. I think a staff person was kind enough to bring me tissues. It was heart-wrenching to listen to their stories, absolutely. And the truth is that I think that everybody on the working group today and Monday, we do genuinely want our kids safe, right? We just have different ways of getting there.
And specifically, just to follow up with what Tom too, on those assault weapon bans, have you moved on that at all based on the testimony?
No.
The governor says he wants a special session, the marquee issue to be an assault-style weapons ban. If this working group is any indication, that is unlikely to happen. Would you agree?
Democrats had a trifecta in 2023 and 2024. Governor Walz was occupying the governor's office. They weren't able to get it passed. The governor calling now in a special session for something he couldn't do when they held all the power is something that's not a solution right now. Right now, the best thing we can do to provide safe schools, safe communities, and provide expanded options and funding for mental health care is those solutions that are going to have that immediate impact. That's what we've tried to have discussed today. It's been disappointing that unfortunately in those conversations, it's been name-calling, telling us that we don't care about children. It has been cutting us off, we get these emails from staff, conflicting emails that tell us we're not going to have any other discussion on any other solutions than what was brought forward on Monday. And so for the governor to call or say he wants to have this now for something he couldn't pass when he had the entirety of government in 2 years is disingenuous. We need to provide those solutions which are going to have an immediate impact. Today, we can and should do that.
What solutions will have an immediate impact? Did you specify a solution?
You know, what I brought up was the tour we had in Lakeville. And I know not everybody agrees with hardening our schools. They did it in such a manner that majority of kids would have no idea what was there. And we could do whack-a-mole on gun laws all day long, but there are people that are determined to do bad or evil that are going to find a way around it. So to me, if the goal is to protect our children, let's start where the children are, which is at school, and that's one of our state's responsibilities.
Why can't you put any restrictions on assault rifles? I mean, why does it have to be widespread access? Why can't you do anything?
So to me, like I said, like you look at California, who has a assault weapon ban since 1989. They have one of the highest cases in the country of assault weapon shootings. The law itself did not do what we're intending to do, which is to protect our kids. So just because we pass another law, like the gun safety bill that was mentioned, I think Senator Howe brought up, or Senator Matthews, a statute that's already in place. So it's already illegal to do what they were referencing. And shooting people is illegal. And I just don't think that's going to solve the problem of protecting our kids. They can go get guns anywhere in the state. You look at all of the people arrested throughout the state having firearms that should not have them, be just another example of that.
Could somebody just speak to what harm they think passing an assault weapons ban would do? If you think that would cause harm?
We're here to talk about solutions and what we can do. It's very clear, as been enumerated numerous times. Passing new gun laws will be tied up in courts and not have an impact, and likely found unconstitutional. We've seen numerous jurisdictions across the country with courts striking these down. What we need to talk about is what can we do today and now that we can protect our children, to make sure that our communities are safe, and to provide that expanded care in mental health services. So it's not about the harm, about passing something. We don't want to be feel good. We don't want to do a slogan. This is about solutions and not slogans. And that's why Republicans are continuing to have these proposals that will have real positive impacts for all of Minnesota and to protect our children.
Question maybe a little more philosophical in nature. It's obvious from the discussion that a firearm means something different to someone in more of a rural area versus in a city. How do you bridge that divide, among the legislature, just the different meaning of a firearm in different districts?
I think we need to have an experience, right? People need to really come out, and we need to experience each other. I tell you what, you ask why I haven't what you would call, I have a 223. I can put in a 30-round magazine. People say, why do you need that? Well, the thing is I like plinking, and I like shooting it. It's fun, believe it or not. And unless you've tried that, you don't know it. And I think there's a lot of fear on firearms because they're not familiar with them. And I think everybody should take the time and go to a gun range. Go and shoot some weapons. Get familiar with them. You'll see that they're not scary. They're just a tool. And I enjoy it. It can be a stress reliever, believe it or not. So you say, what harm? Well, you're taking away something that people enjoy. And if you've never done it, and I see the face there, oh my God. Well, have you ever shot a gun? Have you ever went out and experienced that? So it's, some people, it's a stress reliever, it's an enjoyment to go out to the range, and you know, to try and get that shot in that shot group to be covered by a nickel or a quarter at 100 yards, that's something to achieve. And so it's something that putting rounds on paper is kind of fun.
Is there more to it than just it being a hobby or being fun? Do you think there's some sort of, would somebody be able to speak to maybe, I mean, usually people talk about the Second Amendment in terms that are broader than hunting or fun, right?
Yeah, it's how me and a lot of other people protect our kids. A lot of us in rural areas often have long response times, even on a good day. It's our constitutional right to self-defense, and we have it to make sure that we and our kids stay safe. And many, many families, I mean, I've got school groups in my district that are training awesome young kids on teams for proper handling and usage, and are making awesome citizens that are responsible, that will be law-abiding, that will have the proper respect and use. Yeah, it's for our families, it's for our kids, it's to make, and for those that live in very rural areas, it's that first line of defense before law enforcement can respond, and it's our constitutional right to be able to keep protecting our kids like that.
When I think one of the reasons that I think you need to take a look at the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. When was it written? That was written after our war with Great Britain to try and gain our independence. And take a look at why the Second Amendment was there. And has nothing to do with hunting, has nothing to do with having fun. And I think there you'll find your answer why it's important to maintain it.
Thanks, guys.
This is not a funny subject, of course, but I was just laughing because Senator House said some of us should try going out to a gun range. I'm a pretty good shot. I've done it, and it was fun. It was fun. But if I had to give up shooting an assault rifle to save kids' lives, I know I would choose life, no matter how much fun it was. And I don't think you need an assault rifle for self-defense. I'm really disappointed. I think we accomplished some really good things with this working group. I think Monday alone was important for the public to be able to weigh in and share their thoughts. And I think today we developed some responses to proposals, got a temperature on where things were. But I'm really disappointed that my GOP colleagues just got up here and said we didn't have any time to come up with proposals, but we've been offering amendments in committees and bills we've introduced and tried to get amendments on the floor with all these proposals to save lives and reduce crime. So they've had all of these proposals over the years, and not one of them was brought forward in time for us to have it on the agenda for Monday, except one, frankly, sort of outside-the-box proposal relating to ADHD medication. And then, when I finished Monday's hearing and said, give us your proposals, obviously, we're going to put on the agenda today what we've already received and talked about on Monday. But between Monday and today, crickets, bubkus, as my community would say, nothing. Nothing until we start going through a little bit of the hearing and say, oh yeah, we're talking about hardening schools. And then Senator Matthews comes up at the end of the agenda at 12:20 when we were scheduled to, or tried to adjourn at noon. Oh, let's talk about this proposal. And then for them to come up afterward and say, we've had these proposals. Well, why didn't you bring them forward for us to talk about them? In the age of AI, you can ask one query on your cell phone, and in 5 seconds, you'll have 1,000 proposals for reducing gun violence. You couldn't pick 3 of them or 5 of them and put them on our agenda with a week's notice for us to talk about it? We're not the ones coming up with slogans. We're the ones who proposed solutions and wanted to talk about it, made an intentional effort to reach out and make this a bipartisan process. And we got almost none of that. We heard a lot of excuses. Oh, it'll be tied up in the courts. It's unconstitutional, because we know it's unconstitutional. You know, there's a saying that, depending on your faith traditions, that you're not obligated to solve the entire problem now, right away. But neither are you free to desist from trying. The fact that there might be a problem with implementation or something might be declared to be unconstitutional down the road, or that you might find some aspects of implementation that need to be refined or changed. We do that all the time around here. It's not an excuse for inaction. It's not an excuse to say we can't do that, we can't try that. The question is on the merits. Do we think it would be successful in accomplishing our goal of reducing gun violence? That's the point. And the evidence is pretty solid that a lot of the proposals that we brought forward in our working group on the merits would be successful in reducing gun violence and reducing deaths and injuries from gun violence. There was a lot of talk about evil people, and that's an obvious moral judgment, which we can probably all conclude. Anyone that would go in and shoot someone else, like shooting into a church where kids are en masse, were evil. But the fact is, there are a lot of people out there that are bad people that don't choose to get guns and go kill others. And if they do, the question is, how easily can they access the firearm, the instrumentality of their violence, and how lethal will that instrument be? And we heard the heart-wrenching testimony from the physicians that described the kind of damage the bullets from assault weapons will cause to internal organs compared to the damage from a .38 Special or even just a regular long gun. We can interrupt that violence and that damage. You can't separate the guns from this equation. You just can't. And our proposals recognize that. For Annunciation, the shooting was not in a school. We could harden every school in Minnesota. The shooting was in the church, through the stained glass windows, from the exterior. Is the state of Minnesota going to pay to put bulletproof glass in front of every external window on every place of worship in Minnesota? Is it the taxpayer's obligation to do that? What does that even say about our morality if that is the solution? Wouldn't it make more sense to try to get to the person first before that violence occurs? That shooter had no criminal history, possessed the firearms lawfully, and is now dead. So a mandatory minimum sentence isn't going to have an effect on that shooter. No punishment in courts there. I haven't walked into my place of worship in years when there was an event going on without walking past a number of armed security and others screening people looking for signs of risk. But we haven't locked down, built up walls around my place of worship. And I would not want any community of faith to feel they need to do that. It's not just the Democrats' job to pass an assault weapons ban. We will try. We will try. But it should be and is an obligation of every member of the legislature to take steps to go after the weapons, not just the people. Can we find consensus on mental health funding? We've been working on those issues for years. Can we find some consensus on sentencing and dealing with the criminal justice system? We've been working on those things for years, and we always will. Can we find consensus on fighting hate in society? Reviewing our bias and hate laws in Minnesota when hate is a motivator for some of this violence, although not all of it. Yes, we can do all of that stuff, but you can't separate in the end the instrumentality of the death and of the violence, and those are the guns. So we need to focus on those as well. I don't know if my co-chair, Senator Mohammed, wished to add anything.
I mean, Ron said it all, per usual. I'll say just a few things. What you heard this morning from our GOP colleagues is hypocrisy, hypocrisy, hypocrisy. Every time they've had an opportunity to work with Democrats to do something about this issue, from 23 up until now, they haven't. They've rejected it. Whether it's mental health care, where we put over $200 million into the general fund, voted against it. Millions of dollars for public safety, $300 million for law enforcement, voted against it. And so every single thing that they talked about today, they have voted against it, and they have had every opportunity to vote for it. And you know, they talk about Lakeville. I'm sure it's a wonderful school. I look forward to visiting it. You know where they haven't visited? Annunciation, school and church. They haven't spoken with those parents. They haven't met with them. They don't care to. And so, you know, I reject the notion that this bill doesn't do anything. It's actually a very comprehensive bill. We're still working through it. The final bill is not done. But if if you legally own this type of law, this type of gun, you'll still be able to keep it as long as you register it. What we're trying to do is make sure that there aren't any more, so that what happened at Annunciation doesn't happen in our communities. And they have every opportunity to work with Democrats to do something about this. They don't. And even when they had the majority, they didn't bring anything forward. And so, you know, they say it's time for solutions, not slogans. I agree. I look forward to what solutions that they will bring forward, because they haven't even brought concepts of a plan, let alone a plan. I mean, Donald Trump at least had concepts of a plan. They have nothing. And so I think as the media talks to people, I would hope that you guys ask them, what's your plan? And why have you voted against your own plans over the years? Thank you.
34 votes, when you get to 34 potentially in the caucus, and then how do you move anything through the House, of course, in their tie, which is now for sure.
Well, I'm certainly not going to speculate on the House.
In order to get something signed.
I served there.
It has to be bipartisan. What does that look like?
The solutions ought to be bipartisan, and the leadership above my level and the governor, I'm sure, having those conversations and are maybe can be informed in those conversations by some of our discussions here today and some of the information that came in the testimony on Monday. We don't know who the new senator will be and what that person's position on issues will be. I think these solutions ultimately, if they're going to pass, they will have to be bipartisan. The question came up, look at the membership on this working group. I think there are more GOP senators not on this working group whose districts would very clearly support an assault weapons ban. We know from the polling, 60% of Minnesotans do. And that's across the state. That's not just in the urban core where you might get 80% support. So I think there is room for bipartisan GOP and Democratic support for an assault weapons ban and for a magazine limit as well, which on its own merits would be quite valuable. If you can squeeze off 30 rounds or 100 rounds without having to reload, you can do a lot more damage than if you squeeze off 10 rounds, have to reload, because that pause is a moment for intervention.
Senator, the lack of consensus on almost anything today in this working group, does that raise questions about how worthwhile it would be to have a special session? Would anything significant happen?
Well, I'm going to leave that political question up to the governor and to the legislative leadership.
But you all have votes.
We have votes, and if we get called into special session, which is the governor's prerogative, then we'll be called upon to vote. I think it's valuable to vet these issues and to hold legislators accountable so their constituents know where they are on these issues. There's a value to that alone. I also think there's a reasonable possibility of getting some of these things passed, and I think we have to try.
When was the last time you spoke to, say, Senator Seeberger or Rothschild that maybe questionable on the assault weapons ban?
I haven't been working that particular issue with those senators. I've been focusing on trying to get the public hearing together. So those conversations at some point will happen, and for me or for others who have been leading the efforts on those bills.
What was the purpose of these two working group meetings, and do you feel that these meetings accomplish the purpose or goal you set out to them?
My purpose was to do an intake and get a bunch of proposals on the table, to give an opportunity for the public to share their views on the merits of the proposals and on the reason for them. And we heard that so powerfully, of course, from the Annunciation parents, but also from others. Senator Mohammed and I talked about these things ahead of time and how valuable that would be. And if all we had been able to do was what we did on Monday, that would have been valuable and worthwhile in and of itself. But the next step was to try to find a path forward for changing the laws in the state of Minnesota. And that was what today was intended to help accomplish. I think we actually did find some openings where there could be some bipartisan agreement. We've also elucidated some of the arguments involved, pro and con, on the proposals that were discussed, and I think that will help inform the conversation as well. So I think it was worthwhile. Just I'm really, really disappointed that the Republicans didn't come up with a slew of proposals for us to talk about until after our originally scheduled adjournment time today.
What are you guys saying to the Annunciation parents? I mean, are you telling them that something like an assault weapons ban is going to get done, or what are you saying to them?
Well,
The parents I've spoken with understand what the legislature is, but they also want a vote. They want members to take the vote. They want to speak to those members who are opposing on both sides of the aisle. And so that's where they're at. Whether I've told them, I'm very clear about my position, Ron, is we will vote on it if we see a bill on the floor.
Could somebody address the constitutional question? The gun owners caucus already said that they would file a lawsuit basically immediately if it was passed. Have you thought about, how to defend any type of legislation that would be brought to the courts?
Well, I think if there are very, well, I'm going to say this. With this Supreme Court, it's hard to say for sure, even with settled law, what is clearly unconstitutional and what is not. Because in my judgment, this Supreme Court has overturned, in some cases, 100 years of legal precedent. The Supreme Court in Columbia versus Heller, written by Justice Scalia, a very conservative member and leader of the conservative wing of the Supreme Court, when they opened the door to ongoing private possession of firearms outside of the militia, interpreting that Second Amendment very broadly, Justice Scalia explicitly stated there that the Second Amendment is not absolute, that regulation is legitimate. There are no absolutes in that sense in the Constitution. The Supreme Court, the current configuration that passed Bruin, created out of whole cloth, without any precedent, a new standard about evaluating gun laws relating to what was the status back at the time of the founding or the writing of the Constitution. When we do have firearms that didn't exist at that time. So where does that land? I don't know yet. We have seen challenges from other states, in lower courts, that have gone both ways on some of these questions, and yeah, it takes time to work through that process. I think on every one of these bills or proposals, it's an open constitutional question. Some may be leaning more in one direction than the other, but absolutely not an excuse for taking no action on it.
Are you going to have to see any GOP movement on guns in order for you to maybe open up a little bit more to some of the proposals that they've brought forward, or? Yeah.
Well, at some point, I mean, look, this isn't a purely partisan question, as is clear. We've had some uncertainty among Democrats or some concerns among Democrats about some of the proposals as well. So this is not a purely partisan issue, although it tends in that direction. I think when it comes down to final votes on proposals, yeah, we may be looking at packages. And there will have to be, from my standpoint, there's going to have to be some direct addressing of the guns themselves, in addition to some of the other stuff that, that I might support, more funding for mental health and counseling and treatment and beds and ways to deal with it in the criminal justice system and the other stuff we've talked about. That alone won't be enough. But how that lands depends entirely on what kind of package we see, and that's a subject for conversation with the governor and the legislative leaders.
We'll do time for maybe one more. All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.